See you by the old clock on the wall. It's time for another episode. I was gonna go into a little bit about, I don't know, all the sexual harassment stuff going on, the sexual assault, the rape, the gropings, the mashings. Mashing is awesome. You know what mashing is? You hear about a masher or something like that. It's not. It's not the dude with the raincoat. That's like an exhibition. I don't know. Brown called it an exhibitionist the other day, and I was like, I don't know. I think an exhibitionist is just somebody who likes to take their clothes off. It's not like they're like trying to scare you with their nudity. They just feel free to let it all hang out. You know, there's a movement of women out there who take their tops off. They want to release the breasts, release the hounds, as it were. You know, and they look upon bras as some form of feminist subjugation. Explain that to some poor chick who's like a 42 double D. I mean, you kind of need the support. I think bras are a good thing. Bras are a good thing for women. They're good to have. I mean, then there are the poor ladies who are flat as a pancake. Sometimes there's a little bit of jigglage, but not always. I've known women of all stripe, as it were. I've known the big ones, the little ones. You know, some girls are bigger than others. Some girls' mothers are bigger than others. But you know, you kind of need the support. It's good to have the support. It's like wearing a cup when you go when you're playing baseball or squash or whatever else. What is squash, by the way? Is that some form of handball or racquetball? It's got to be something along those lines. It's like maybe tennis, except you can bounce it off the walls. It has to go over the net, but you can use the wall. And the wall is not out of bounds, so you smash it against the wall, and then it goes over the net or something like that. But you have to keep it within the lines on the ground. I think that's what squash is. I'm not sure. If you know what it is, send me a definition. I'll happily read it. If not, otherwise I'll just assume I'm right. So getting back to the masher thing, the masher is the guy, I guess. It's a guy. I mean, I guess it could be a woman too. But they like to mash their private parts up against you for some reason. That's pretty much like an assault or an attack right there. But we call them mashers. And it's such a funny, cute, quaint, old-sounding word, isn't it? The funniest thing I ever heard was just an invention. It was just an invention. It was in the movie Revenge of the Nerds. I believe Robert Carradine and Anthony Edwards go over to the campus cops to complain about being bullied by all the jocks, bullying them for being nerds. And he says, we get so many complaints about that. There's very little we can do as campus cops. Do you see that person over there? It's a blind person sitting on a chair, and the blind person looks traumatized, and I believe the officer says she was a victim of mopery, and they're like, mopery? What's mopery? And that's exposing yourself to a blind person, which is that's fantastic. I love that idea. I love the idea because it makes no sense. Exposing yourself to a blind person. That's just great. That to me that's precious. That is a grade A joke. Great joke. Remember when comedies were funny? Anyway, so we're on to this thing, and I'm calling it the new witch hunt because it seems it has parallels to the communist witch hunt of the 1940s, 50s, and early 60s, the Red Scare, the Red Menace, and that, okay, just a little bit of a history lesson. I believe that started because after World War II, the doors closed between the U.S. and the USSR. It was kind of like if the Crips and the Bloods got together to defeat a greater power in L.A., and they got together for this one thing, and then they said, that's it. We're not friends. This was just an arrangement. And then the Cold War begins, and then suddenly we start hating on them because they're building their own atomic weapons. And I think a lot of technology came out of Nazi Germany at the time with their scientists and everything. And we were stealing up their rocket scientists, and they were stealing up rocket scientists. And you know, it's creepy too, because if Germany had not fallen, and then that section, and then Germany divvied up between us and the Ruskies, they would have developed nuclear technology and probably would have destroyed us all. And it's a good thing that we finally entered the war when we did. But anyway, after the war and all that, leading into from the late 40s going all the way through to the early 60s, and sometimes even the blacklist affected many people outside of that for years, like in the 80s even. There was a witch hunt, and if you wanted to destroy someone back then, if you wanted to destroy someone's credibility and reputation, you immediately accused them of communist sympathies. And their lives were destroyed because of this. Their lives. And it's been many different things. I remember I talked about Robert Reed from before. Homosexuality was also considered a menace, and people were treated that way as well. But now, since we're in the more permissive, at least socially permissive times, I want to say, homosexuals are welcomed and honored and celebrated. So now, with these Harvey Weinstein allegations that started, Andrew had speculated, and it's a very good thought he had, that this was a coordinated effort. It seemed coordinated. Since then, many theories have popped up. One of those theories, the first being that this is an attack on Hillary. This is something I heard. And I believe I heard it from the No Agenda show, Adam Curry and John Dvorak. A very good podcast, by the way. They deconstruct the media. And when you listen to the show, you begin to realize just how powerful the media is and how the media tends to influence people. More than any governmental concern, more than politics, the media winds up being the chief orchestrator of a lot of the hostility that we see for various figures in and out of politics and entertainers and people like that. But that theory is that because Harvey Weinstein was a major, major contributor to Hillary's campaign and to the Clintons, and the Democrats, excuse me, the Democrats are hell bent on keeping Hillary out of any more elections, keeping her out of politics, out of the political spectrum, getting her out of there. That they're going after her major campaign contributors, and then I've seen other efforts by the party to separate or distance themselves from Hillary. Donna Brazil's book, even though she put that out and she kind of made the party look bad. She made the party look like really bad, but she doesn't want to admit to what she wrote, which is so interesting. You see her on television and she's like, I didn't write that. Yes, she did. It's actually there. It's written there about what she did. And about how basically money talks and people walk, and Hillary infused the party with an enormous sum of money. And essentially it was a pay-to-play kind of operation. They did everything. Donna Brazil tries to make it sound like Bernie Sanders was like always one of their candidates, and they did everything they could to support him. That's complete and utter horseshit. Bernie Sanders was drawing in more record numbers. He had much more of an enthusiastic response from the people, from the voters, and that's why you got a lot of very pissed off Democrat voters out there because they didn't want Hillary in there. But Hillary keeps trying to put herself into the conversation, and now after Donna Brazil, we're bringing up Bill again and his antics when he was president. If nothing else, even if you refuse to believe Juanita Broderick or any of the rape allegations that went on and the payout to Paula Jones, they gave her more money than she asked for. I found that very interesting. If you refuse to believe all that, you have to own up to the idea that this guy felt comfortable getting blowjobs in the Oval Office. And when I was younger, I would say this: I always thought it wasn't a big deal when I was younger. I was like, so what? Yeah, you got a blow. Good for him. Good on him, or whatever. And then I saw Dennis Miller doing some. I think it was the Raw Feed. It was a show called the Raw Feed. It was one of his stand-ups, and this is after he had publicly come out of the closet and revealed himself to be kind of conservative, which is unusual. You don't really see that. You don't see a stand-up comedian going that route. And he made a statement that I thought was kind of grotesque at the time, but now as a husband and father, I agree with this. he said that he was glad that George W. was elected. George W. was president at the time because he will bring back integrity to the White House. And I didn't quite understand the definition of what integrity meant. And now I've come to that conclusion. Bill Clinton is the kind of guy who is comfortable getting a blowjob in the Oval Office from somebody. The Oval Office is a place of work. If that's his job, that must be his office, to quote George Carlin. How many blowjobs do you get in the office when you go to work? How many times do you do that? And you do the thing, the empowerment, and when you got the cigar and you're smoking it, and you stick it up a woman's hoo-ha, and then you're lighting it up and everything, and people get angry about a couple of comments that Donald Trump made with a live mic when he was talking about the privilege of celebrity, the privilege of the powerful. Eddie Murphy made the same joke, and everybody laughed at that. But Donald Trump is a pig, so we have to hate him for that, even though we would ordinarily laugh. And I think Billy Bush was laughing too. But that's none of my business, because it really isn't anybody's business. It was something that was never meant to be broadcast, and obviously somebody recorded it because they hate Trump or they hate Billy Bush, God knows. So Clinton winds up being this guy where it's okay for him to do that. He was impeached. The media keeps saying this. The news sources keep saying this, but he was not impeached for that act. He was impeached for lying. That's really all he was impeached for. It's like, we don't care what you did. You fucking lied to us, you asshole. So out you go. But he didn't really go out because it was the end of his term. He got everything he wanted. He's a man who's used to getting everything he wanted, and if he didn't, he would have some kind of crazy-ass breakdown and probably rape somebody. Juanita Broaddrick did say, Bill Clinton raped me, and Hillary Clinton threatened me. Okay? Hang on a moment. So this is an important point that I wanted to raise, and I know it's going to piss people off. If you haven't already turned it off, the podcast, I'm going to say allegations are not the same as guilt. Anyone can accuse anybody of anything at any given time. And then you say, well, that's not true. Well, guess what? It's alleged. It's alleged that you did something. Unless there is actual proof it didn't really happen. And that can work both ways, where you're talking about Roy Moore or you're talking about Al Franken. Now, I want to start with Roy Moore. I don't really buy the story. Right now, as it's shaping up, I don't buy it. There's a few things that don't add up. The yearbook doesn't add up. Apparently, Roy Moore signed something into somebody's yearbook. I think I had a yearbook once. My wife has a yearbook, or maybe two, in storage, and it's people. You just pass the yearbook around and they sign it, and then you take it home or something. You usually don't have anybody else signing it. I don't even know that relatives will sign a yearbook. Basically, it's just your classmates, maybe your teacher. You had a popular. You were popular with your teacher, and for good reasons. You have people all around who are signing it in the school, but Roy Moore signed somebody's yearbook, really? There's a couple of other things, and I don't know that the Democrats were aware of this, but back then, the charge, the allegation, this woman's crying too. We're talking about 30 or 40 years, and she's crying. Was it so traumatic? You're remembering it now, and you're just, oh my God. It could go back to the old definition of what triggering used to mean. Triggering now means some kind of an emotional trigger that sets you off, that makes you go nuts. Triggering, the classic definition of the word, was that something terrible happened to you. Let's say you were sexually assaulted by a maniac in a Bugs Bunny costume, and the Foreigner song, I Want to Know What Love Is, was playing in the background. And you've blocked it out of your head because it's so traumatic. And then 30 years later, you're walking down the street and a car passes by, and as it's passing by, it's playing I Want to Know What Love Is by Foreigner, and you suddenly get that memory triggered in your head. Oh my God, Bugs Bunny raped me, or something, whatever, I don't know. That's a silly analogy, and I do apologize for that. I love Bugs Bunny, even though he does tend to antagonize his tormentors with kisses. If you've ever noticed Bugs Bunny, whenever he's got the drop on Elmer Fudd or somebody along those lines, Yosemite Sam, he will go and kiss them. And it's not a kiss of love. It's not a kiss of desire. It's a kiss of, I got you and you hate me and I'm going to plant my lips on your face. So it goes, mwah, like that. So anyway, what was I talking about? Roy Moore? So the guy, he's insists that he's innocent. That's another thing, you know. And then there's a great, I believe it was Dvorak might have said something about how when you're a pervert, you tend to escalate. So you get worse and worse and worse every year, every action you do, it gets worse. It's called escalating fetishism. So you wind up doing far worse things. He, I don't know what it was with him. If the allegations are true, he's just like, well, okay, you know what? I'm not going to molest or rape children anymore. I'm not going to do that. I'll stick with my wife or something like that. Maybe I'll keep it in the family, as it were. Roy Moore was a Democrat at the time that these supposed incidents occurred. He was a Democrat. And so kind of not where you want to go if you are the Democratic Party working in concert with the media to destroy the man's credibility. That's all I'm going to say about Roy Moore. And moving on to Al Franken, I will say that I do believe the Al Franken story to a certain extent. I think Al Franken, he was a comedian back then. I don't know much about his humor back then. I did look at old Saturday Night Live episodes. I remember I was a kid when he was on the second wave of Lorne Michaels' run of Saturday Night Live, where he came back after a couple of years wandering around in the desert when Dick Ebersol and Gene Domanian were running the show. He came back in 1985 with an all-new cast, and he brought Al Franken back. I believe he brought Tom Davis back too, his writing partner. They were two of the funniest writers on the show, and I remember when the show first started, they only paid them because they worked as a writing team, Al Franken and Tom Davis. Lauren only paid them one salary for one writer that they had to split up. So, until they gained a reputation later on. I believe they made a movie called One More Saturday Night, but they also appeared in the movie Trading Places as two delivery men who are supposed to be delivering a gorilla to some kind of museum. And they're drunk. They're basically like drunk delivery men, and they do a little shtick, and it's very funny. But what I was going to say is I don't believe that Al Franken is a predator. He doesn't strike me as a predator. He just strikes me as kind of overly amorous. He gets a little crazy. He gets a little psycho. He's pretending to grab a woman's boobs in a photo that's asleep. Another one says, he harassed somebody that he was on a show with Bill Maher. And more allegations come out, but he doesn't strike me as that kind of guy in that way. So I'm on the fence about Al Franken, but I do know also that the Democrats are trying to pretend this isn't actually happening. So they're being very coy about it and weird and manipulative. Obviously, they want to attack anything that's Republican and not attack anything that might be Democrat. But we also have to remember Al Franken's not really a politician per se. Yeah, he's a junior senator, and he got in. There was some question as to the legitimacy of the election around him because a bunch of votes went missing and then suddenly reappeared, and he wound up winning on that basis. So it was a little bit weird. It was a little bit George Bush 2000, if you will. So, moving forward after Harvey Weinstein, so it's like a flood of allegations for everything, everyone, everywhere. Kevin Spacey, Ben Affleck, George Takei, one of my favorites. I love that one because he pretty much all but admits that he's a forceful man when it comes to what he wants, and if he wants it, he will get it. And he said that on Howard Stern. That's running around on YouTube. You can probably find that somewhere. Who else? Louis C.K., right. Louis C.K. You do want to think, because he, again, very talented comedian. I love a lot of his stuff. I loved Lucky Louie. That was a show that played on HBO. I loved it. I did love The Louie Show. I thought it was great. It's unusual because you don't want to think that he's not as talented as he tries to make everyone think he is, that perhaps his humor comes from invention. But then a lot of the things he says revolve around this notion that he is a chronic and fierce masturbator. I've been in situations where I've been forced to watch people masturbate and I didn't want to. I mentioned it on the Extreme Cinema Harvey Weinstein episode. The theme from Charles in Charge triggers me, if you will. But it was more bizarre than anything else, and really just kind of a very sad young man who did that in front of me and felt the need to have to do it in front of me. Some people are just ill. Some people are not. So it comes down to power, abuse of power if possible. I can't really go without Franken on that because he has very little power. He does a lot of talking. He seemed to be very serious about entering the political realm. But Louis C.K. is a disturbed individual, and he probably I don't know how this should affect anything else, because why is it coming out now? I mean, why does this stuff come out now? Why does it come out? It has to come out for a reason. The other theory with regard to all the harassment stuff is Netflix and similar streaming services. These are coordinated attacks on streaming services because it seems like a lot of the people involved, Jeffrey Tambor, another example on an Amazon show, Stranger Things, the boy who plays Mike on the show had an agent who had molested him or something like that. I had heard something about that. I'm not really sure that that's true. There's a lot of misinformation that's coming out as well. It's a very strange time now because everything, including the Me Too hashtag, it's all coming to a point where even looking at somebody without their permission can be some form of sexual harassment or assault in some way. I'll finish this up by talking about a sexual harassment videotape that we were all forced to watch. I think it was about a half an hour long. I'm not really sure. I had gotten a job, and during the 3 days of orientation that we had to go through, but luckily I was being paid. 3 days of orientation. There was a sexual harassment videotape that we had to watch, and it was a woman. Okay, it's two coworkers in a place, and a guy says to a woman, "That's a very nice dress. You look very nice today." And apparently, and his tone wasn't lascivious. He wasn't like, "You look really good." Oh, ooh. No, he was like, "That's a very nice dress you're wearing." And she was like, "Tom, I'm offended. You're harassing me," or something like that. And he's like, "I'm sorry," ooh, or whatever. And the thing about it was, okay, this is the thing. They turned off the tape. The show was done. The moderator, if you will, was basically, any questions? Any questions from anybody? And you know, I mean, like, I was thinking the same thing that a handful of these people were thinking. This woman is at her job, and she has enormous breasts. She has enormous breasts, and she's wearing a very micro mini skirt and showing off all this leg. And I'm like thinking, you are, okay, all the people were asking, she's dressed like this and she looks like this, and she's offended when someone tells her she looks nice. What kind of response did she want to elicit from people dressed like this? Did she want to be completely ignored? Is this what, I mean, like, she's dressed like this and she's complaining about harassment. Thankfully, there are, you know, I mean, like, unfortunately, we have in this country a vocal minority, which means very few people, but they're very loud. The majority of people just kind of just want to go to work every day, come home, watch TV, have dinner, go to bed. And, you know, they don't want to be bothered with it. So your majority is silent. Your minority is very vocal, very loud. And this is what starts up with the Black Lives Matter and the Antifa and the neo-Nazis, if you will, or whatever it is. It's a minority. It's a minority. That's really all it is. But I was gratified to see that people agreed with me on that topic. So it's going to get worse as we move forward. We're going into 2018. We're at the end of November, going into December. We got Christmas and everything. It's going to get worse. It's going to get so much worse. But eventually, maybe we'll get a break. We'll get a nice reprieve, like we did in the handful of years post 9/11, where we could make jokes, where we could relax a little bit. I mean, that's really all we need to do is just relax a little bit. Um, that's about it until the next revelations come out, I guess. We'll put it on hold and we'll see what happens. I want to wish everybody out there a nice Merry Christmas, Merry New Year. Very funny thing. When I was a kid, we did prank calls, but they were nice prank calls. We used to call just strangers up out of the white pages and say Merry Christmas. I called this one person who was, I guess, an immigrant or something like that. Someone who didn't have had a noticeable accent, and I said Merry Christmas, and the girl says Merry Krishna, and I'm like Merry Krishna to you too. So everyone out there, Merry Krishna and Happy New Eve.